it's a highlight for me because you look around this place, wouldn't be here if it weren't for Robert Khayat. Robert Khayat had the vision to go ask some people for money. How redundant is that? He had the vision to ask everybody for money, but he targeted the foundation that I work for, and he went to the founder of that foundation and got the money to put this facility in. And it's just been terrific to be able to have good programs like this, and how fitting it is that Robert could come be in the program, in the center that he's responsible for providing.
Thank you.
So Robert's a key part of this. And then the other key part of this Overby Center is Curtis Wilkie. If it almost sounds like a cliche, but as I was thinking about how we're going to put this together, what is it going to be? It's Southern journalism and politics. And then I thought, what personifies that? What do you need to put the building blocks together for that? I mean, Curtis Wilkie. Curtis Wilkie is Southern journalism and politics. And so he was the founding fellow for the Overby Center and continues in that role. The good thing about being a founding fellow is nobody else can ever have that job because you can only have one founding fellow. And so he has done great work here at the center and across the university, but he uses the center now as the jumping off point for so many things that he does. I'm honored and privileged this semester, like last fall semester, to co-teach a class with Curtis. And that is more fun than anything I've ever done in my life. And this year we're teaching on Camelot, the Kennedys, and the media, the 50th anniversary of President Kennedy's death. And we're just having a great time in there. And I told the students the first class how it was going to be, and it's turned out that way every time. I said, I'm the play-by-play announcer, and Curtis is the color commentator. And of course, everybody remembers John Madden, and nobody remembers who the play-by-play announcers are. So Curtis today will be both play-by-play announcer and color commentator. I'm just so glad all of you are here, and I'm glad now to be able to turn the program over to Curtis, my friend.
Thank you, Charles. Well, we're here in part to celebrate the publication of Robert Khayat's memoir, The Education of a Lifetime. It came out last month, and it's a wonderful book. I know a number of you all probably have already read it. Neil White, the publisher, is here, and he did a great job. I've got the reader's copy, but the real thing is out, and it's available in the bookstore near you. And if you haven't already gotten it and read it, I encourage you. Anybody who loves Ole Miss will really relate to the book. I should also say that I actually had a tie on originally in deference to our former chancellor, and then he walked in and he had no tie on, so I was able to get rid of my tie, but I'm wearing a coat in deference to my friend Robert. But one thing I won't be no deference, I will call him Robert and not Dr. Khayat or Chancellor Emeritus or whatever, because we're old friends. We were in school together here. Robert used to bark at me when I was a freshman in Army ROTC, and he was our platoon sergeant. So that's how far back we go. But anyway, thank you all for being here with us. And we're just going to have a very informal conversation. And I hope to leave a little bit of time for any questions that you all might have. And afterwards, we'll have a reception out in the lobby. So stick around and join us. And if anybody brought a book, I'm sure Robert will be happy to sign it, won't you?
I will.
Okay. Let me just start off. This is a book, so much of it's about Ole Miss, and I think a lot of us thought that your experience at Ole Miss started when you enrolled here as freshman in 1956, but it actually started long before that. Why don't you just, I don't think a lot of people realize that. Tell us about your
Okay.
first connection with Ole Miss.
I'll do that, but may I make a little statement before I answer that question?
Depends on what kind of statement it
Well,
is.
it's a good statement. Charles Overby was incredibly generous in his comments about the existence of this facility. And I did go down to Cocoa Beach, and I did go see Mr. Al Newharth. And he said, "Where in the daylights have you been? I've been waiting on you to come see me for 5 years." And I said, "I've been talking to Charles Overby for 5 years, trying to get permission to come ask you for money to build the Overby Center on the Ole Miss campus, and it took 5 years to get that permission. So the truth is, we would not be here but for you, Charles L. Overby." Secondly, Neil White, I want Neil to raise his hand, please. And Neil White, this book would not exist but for Neil White. People throw words around pretty loosely, extravagant comments, but I will tell you, if there's a better editor on the planet than Neil White, I don't need to meet her or him, because he and I worked together daily for a year to produce this book, which if you decide to read it, I hope you will enjoy. And then third, I learned a lot in ROTC from Private Curtis.
Oh, no, you didn't.
I knew that I could not be in the military. And be
We would have lost World War II.
We
if I'd
really
been
were.
involved.
No doubt about it. But I came to Ole Miss in 1956, actually June 3rd, 1956. I was a recruited athlete. How do y'all like the term student athlete? Don't y'all think that's kind of funny? We don't say student journalist or student choral music person, but we say student athlete. And I think we're trying to, anyway, I came in 1956 as a student athlete, and I came in the summer because I wanted to be a doctor. Gene Wood was Dr. Eugene Gregory Wood, and some of you, if you're from Jackson, may know who that is, but Gene Wood was from Moss Point, and he's 4 years older than I am, and his younger brother Larry was my best pal. And so Gene was the idol of every observant youngster, and he was my idol. He was one of those people who always looked freshly showered, combed, pressed, made straight A's, played quarterback, was most handsome, was Mr. Moss Point High School, and he was coming to Ole Miss to study medicine. And if Gene Wood was coming to Ole Miss to study medicine, I was going to come study medicine. But what Gene didn't tell me was anything about freshman chemistry. And so when I was having this conversation with Coach Swayze about coming to Ole Miss, he said, "Well, you better come in the summer because you'll have to take your labs in the summer because pre-med's great, but it can't interfere with football." And it kind of eased into my brain. I sort of knew what the priorities were going to be once I joined the Ole Miss Rebel football team. So I came in summer of 1956, and Curtis said I'd spent time here earlier, and I had in 1943. Our family lived in Faculty House 1, and my father was training military second lieutenants in what we then called jiu-jitsu, which I think has taken on different names now, and they give you belts if you're at certain levels, but it was hand-to-hand combat, and he's been a high school football coach, and so we lived here on Faculty Row, and we realized we'd changed towns from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I was 5 when my mother washed the sheets and hung them out on the line, and they were frozen when she was trying to take. We'd never been in freezing weather before. We'd never seen snow. We lived on the Gulf Coast, and so we had to adapt to hanging clothes in the basement of a Faculty House 1, and to learn to walk to Sunday school in the snow. And so that memory was really just deeply embedded in my mind. And as a 5-year-old, I saw it through a 5-year-old's eyes. And I remember, I mean, the squirrels seemed bigger than squirrels can possibly be, and the trees in the grove were bigger than any trees I'd ever seen before. And the rolling hills were like mountains, because down on the Gulf Coast, I mean, a hill is where somebody piles some sand up. Down on the beach, that becomes a hill. And so anyway, it was a huge year in our lives. We moved in the moving van. I have no idea who paid for whoever the mover was, but my mother and the 4 children rode in the moving van with the driver, 335 miles from Moss Point. And at that time, all of the power in the state was north of Jackson, mostly in the Mississippi Delta. And so the streets up in North Mississippi were paved, but the highways in South Mississippi were gravel. And so we rode on a gravel road from Moss Point to Gulfport to Hattiesburg, and when we were just about Mendenhall, we saw some real live cement, which we'd never seen before, of course, and rolled on in and came. But the years passed, and I came to Ole Miss, and I wanted to be Gene Wood, and I wanted to be a football player, and I wanted to be a star football player, and I wanted to catch passes, score touchdowns, and that sort of thing. And then I wanted to be a doctor and deliver babies and save lives and cure illnesses and that sort of thing. And then I ran into Charles Nevin Jones, C.N. Jones, C.N. being the symbol for cyanide. He was affectionately known as Cyanide. And you can cut me off now anytime. Ideal is that...
This is good. I wanted you to get to your Cyanide Jones story.
Okay, so I think it's still chemistry 105, 106, 107, 108. And if you were going to be able to be successful in chemistry, you either had to use a slide rule to work problems, or you had to use logarithm tables to work the problems. I had never seen a slide rule, and I had never heard of a logarithm table. And I'm sitting in this first day of class, and the auditorium is much like this. And Mr. Jones comes storming in, there are 50 of us, and he comes storming in to the front of the room, and he throws his things up on the table in front of him. He's wearing these big horn-rimmed glasses. He's got this bulbous nose, and he sort of talks through his nose, and he's kind of hyperactive. And he opens by saying, "I'm C.N. Jones, and this is Chemistry 105, and today you should give your hearts to God, because for the summer, your asses belong to me." I'm thinking, oh my God. And I knew I was in a rough spot. So anyway, he starts talking. And after he said, "I'm C.N. Jones and your body belongs to me," I didn't understand another word he said. And the reason was he was using big words. And my wife laughs about this, but words like entity, like, E-N-T-I-T-Y, which was a brand new word for me. So I was in some deep stuff that first day of chemistry. So I go up to the desk after class over, and I got these big old 18-year-old homesick child, pitiful tears, bro. And I said, "Mr. Jones, I think I'm in the wrong place." He said, "No, why would you?" I said, "After you told us who you were, I didn't understand another word, not one other word did I get." He said, "Oh, don't worry about it, man." He said, "I can teach you this chemistry, and I'll stay with you. If you have problems, you tell me." So we went a week, and I had problems. I still didn't understand anything he was saying, but I was memorizing that chart. There was this chart of elements up there on the wall, and so I memorized it. I knew every symbol and what it stood for, but I didn't know what it meant. I mean, I had no idea why AG meant anything, or FE meant anything, or K meant anything. I didn't. Or why mixing them up might cause an explosion, or anything like that. So we did the lecture in the morning and the lab in the afternoon, and we got to the end of the semester, and Ken, the other football player was Ken Kirk from Tupelo, and he and I were both going to be doctors. And so he takes off for 2 weeks out of a 12-week summer to play in 2 All-American, the high school All-American game and the Mississippi high school. I take off a week of 12 weeks to play in the Mississippi High School All-Star game. And I understood X's and zeros. That made total sense to me. But chemistry formulae?
You're asking me?
Okay, either way, more than one formula. I just didn't get it. So we have the final exam, and he gives us 20 questions. It takes me less than 10 minutes to complete my exam. And so I sheepishly walked up to his office and gave him the exam. He said, "You through?" I said, "I'm through." He said, "Well, you better come back and see me in about an hour." I said, "Yes, sir." So I did, and I walked back in his office, and forgive me if you find vulgarity offensive, but he said, "You stupid son of a bitch." And he was right. I mean, he was dead right. I'm 18 years old, and I'm homesick. My heart is breaking, and I'm getting ready to fail chemistry. And so Ken Kirk makes the same kind of grade I made. And he said, do you want to know how many points you made out of 100? And I did not want to know. But I said, yes, sir, I do. I want to. He said, you made 8. I said, what? 8? He said, 8 points out of 100. You fool, I've been spending the whole summer trying to teach you. Now listen, if you swear you'll never come in this chemistry building again, I will give you a D. And Ken said, what did you just say? He said, I'm going to give each of you a D. And Ken said, well, hell, if you're going to give us a grade, give us an A. Don't give us a D. We don't need Ds, we need A's. So anyway, we got a chemist, but I immediately went over there and got into history real fast because that made a lot of sense to me. And so that was my introduction to Ole Miss. And when I had received my 4 D- complimentaries in freshman chemistry, first 12 hours, I thought, I'm probably going to be chancellor of the university by then. Don't you think?
When you were being recruited, you were outstanding high school athlete. I was distressed to read in your book that you even considered going to LSU at one point. But,
I did.
But did you? I would have thought surely your heart was always set for Ole Miss.
Well, the reason 15 and 16-year-old boys had those reactions in those days is that you go to Baton Rouge to a night football game. It's the most colorful sporting venue I've ever seen. And I've played from the East Coast to the West Coast at virtually every level. And Coach Diesel was as charming as Cary Grant. And he would get the recruits in this room and jammed in there, and it would be more than 100 degrees. And he would put an LSU talk on you like you wouldn't believe. And then you come back out, and who greets you but the Golden Girls from LSU who are in these beautiful golden outfits. And they're playing Hold That Tiger in the crowd screaming and Go Tigers and all that stuff, So, I was pretty much impressed. And then Ole Miss played in 2 Sugar Bowls and practiced in Biloxi. And that was just 18 miles from our hometown. So we went over and watched them practice. And when I saw how fast they were and how beautifully built they were and the lovely uniforms that I just absolutely loved, I thought, I probably am going to go to Ole Miss. And then we had a coach come to Moss Point. And by the way, while I was chancellor, every time I went to a group of students, and Andy Mullins went with me most times, I would ask the students who among the faculty at the school, or no, who in your life besides your family has influenced you most? And almost without exception, it would be the coach. And it wouldn't matter if the student played sports or not. The coach is a hugely influential person. So our coach in the 10th grade was named Earl Octo Dixie Howell. And he had played for Ole Miss, and he could run like the wind. And I loved him. I fell dead over him. I was in love with him and his wife, Peggy, and their daughter, Beth. And so that's really what changed my life and sent me to Ole Miss. I love the colors. I love the band. I love the reputation of the university for preparing leaders and professional people. And the people I knew from Ole Miss had an air about them that was different from the people I knew from other places. Now, the guy from State who came to see me was named Rabbit Brown. And the first comment was, if you go to Ole Miss, you'll have to wear dress pants to class. Dress pants to class, for God's sake. So anyway, I didn't think about going to State, but LSU sent Barney Poole, and Barney Poole's a 3-time All-American, and he wears about a size 50. He wore about a size 56 triple extra large, extra long jacket, and when he hung it in the Moss Point High School dressing room, it looked like a warm-up. It looked like the thing you'd wear. So anyway, he put it on me and told me I'd be a star in at LSU. So I thought about it again, but not long. But then the kicker was when the guy from Tulane came, Jack Green, who coached at West Point, and my brother played at Tulane. And Jack Green says, if you'll come to Tulane, your sophomore year, you will start as fullback. And I said, now, Coach Green, thank you, but I have to tell you, if I'm your starting fullback, you're going to lose all 10 games because you're going to be in big trouble because I am real slow. So anyway, it wasn't a hard decision. I went through the machinations, but the LSU people knew how to do it. They sent you all this purple and gold stationery and ballpoint pens and pictures of Coach Dietzel and Joe Tuminello from Brookhaven. So, you know, bingo.
It's football season. Let's talk a little bit more football. Tell us just a little bit about the camaraderie that existed on your Ole Miss teams. I mean, they were really our great team. Those were our glory years. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I think freshmen didn't play when you were here.
We played just
so
freshman.
You played 3 years, and I'm thinking those 3 years, you lost to Arkansas 1 year. The next year you lost to LSU and Tennessee, and next year lost to LSU again, the Cannon game.
Right.
That's it. Four games in 3 years. You won
Out of 30.
2 Sugar Bowls and 1 Gator Bowl.
One Gator Bowl.
And the other thing that, when we've talked about it, you told me about the people who were in your class on the team and how many of them went on to be very successful professional people.
Yes, and by that you don't mean professional football people.
Well, a lot of them did go into pro ball, but
that.
then they became lawyers,
doctors
very successful businessmen.
and accountants and successful business people. It was an extraordinary group of people, and it really did start with the faculty. We had a faculty here in 1956 that was comparable to, I'm sure, any in the South and maybe any in the country. High quality programs that were just so inspirational that even if you were from Moss Point and didn't know what a logarithm table was, you got real interested in France and the history of France and other things. And those experiences that we had were probably enhanced. Not probably, they were enhanced because we were members of a team. And if you read this book, you'll find that team is one of the messages that I try to make. I try to persuade the reader that teams are really important, and having great teams, that's really important. And teams involve people with different skills who make a commitment to bring those skills to the initiative, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter, I think, if you're running IBM or playing for the Oakland Raiders or director of the Boston Symphony. You've got to operate as a team, and you've got to know where you're going and what you're trying to accomplish and be willing to do what's necessary. And so when we came to Ole Miss as football players, that was a condition of staying. If you wanted to be here, you were going to be a member of the team, and you were going to play by the rules. And if you weren't going to do that, you were going to go back home, get a job. I would have probably gone in the Army if I hadn't stayed here. But every one of us pretty much needed to be here. But we were taught the value of teams and mutual commitment, and that individual recognition would come, but it was not paramount. What was paramount was that you established your goals and you did what you had to do to prepare to attain those goals. And then you celebrated your victories together and you mourned your losses together. And I had some of both. I happen to be a place kicker. And even though place kicking is a team event, ultimately, if the kick is good, the place kicker made it. If it's bad, the place kicker missed it. And that's fair enough. But there are a lot of people involved in making that work. And I just found those rules that we learned as team members to be transferable to everything that we did. And so when I became chancellor, and one of the reasons so much of this book is about being chancellor is I did it for 14 years, but the team that I put together, and that's a self-serving declaration. I had very clear criteria about the people I wanted to work with me and for me to work with. And number one was I wanted them to be better at what they did than I would be if I did it. That's one. I didn't want to be the same or not as good as. I wanted to be better. And I had enough emotional security to live with knowing that Andy Mullins could do a lot more business with the Mississippi legislature than I could. I mean, he could communicate with them, and we have to do, that's one of the things we do. And he did it well. And so that number one was, can they do it better than I could do it? Number two, I gave them the authority to make decisions. I was an associate dean for years, And I had lots of responsibility, but I didn't have any authority. And so our team members had the authority to pull the trigger. If they thought it was a good idea to do X, we did X. If we were successful, then they received the credit. Either a newspaper article, a picture, or a plaque, or a pat on the back in the group, or whatever. But it was a team of people who were committed to each other, but all of us were mostly committed to the university. We viewed ourselves as fiduciaries, and we felt that if we established our goals, and if we have time and you want me to, I'll talk about that a little bit. And if we pursued those goals, then we really could be what we wanted to be. And that team committed. And when Chancellor Jones took over as chancellor, about a month into it, he called me and said, I have to tell you, this is the best team of people I have ever been associated with. Medical practice, college, medical school, anywhere. These people are all focused on being a great university, and they're willing to do what we have to do. And so that little set of lessons I learned on Coach Vaught's football team, because that's how it was on the team.
Yeah. Let me, we'll get you up to be chancellor now, but before we leave football, I want to ask you about a couple of your football hires. Tommy Tuberville,
right.
Did you feel betrayed by him when he kind of left us in the lurch?
When we were, I'm going to answer that question, okay? But when we had the presidential debate here, this young, gorgeous woman from some network from somewhere said, "Are you all feeling betrayed by Senator McCain, who told us on Wednesday he wasn't coming on Friday? He was going to Washington to solve the budget problem." This was 1998, y'all. It's been a few years since then, and the budget problem is not yet solved. But anyway, I knew he was going to change his mind. But anyway, this lady says on world television, "Do you feel betrayed by Senator McCain?" I said, betrayal is just not something that we do at Ole Miss. And she said, "What did you say?" I said, "Betrayal is not part of our culture. We just move on." And then she clicked and went to commercial. She said, "You SOB, why did you say that?" I said, "You think I'm going to say on television that we feel betrayed by a United States senator?"
Well, there's a difference between Tommy Tuberville and John McCain.
Yeah, big difference. Okay, so we'll get to Tommy Tuberville. So Pete Boone and I had the job of finding a coach. We'd gone on probation. Billy Brewer had left. Coach Warner Alford had honorably resigned, I might add. So we had to find a coach, and we found two, David Cutcliffe and Tommy Tuberville. And Pete really liked Tommy Tuberville, so he was selected. And Tommy had glitz. I mean, he kind of sparkled. And when they put the cameras on him, his eyes flashed, and he was glib, and people liked it. I think women thought he was pretty and all that stuff. And so anyway, we're sitting there and waiting on Suzanne, his wife. I'm telling you about Tommy Tuberville now, okay? Now I haven't totally digressed. Anyway, we're waiting on Suzanne to get there for the press conference, and he says, "Chancellor, you need to give me some advice." And y'all have to know, it's uncommon for a coach to ask anybody for advice, particularly chancellors. But anyway, I said, "You really want my advice?" I said, "Okay, here's three things. Don't be greedy. You're gonna get rich. I mean, this crazy society we in. We pay all this money to coaches, so you're gonna get rich. And number two, don't let your ego get out of control. People will deify you so fast because you win football games that you'll be thought of as God or God's messenger for sure. And then third, I don't know what your extramarital attitudes are, but if you choose to move around that league, be real careful because people are watching you all the time and you're gonna get caught. I mean, just forget thinking you won't get caught because you will. Which the motorcycle rider it's all been proven pretty recently. So anyway, he said, "Oh, that's no problem. That's no problem for me." He said, I can handle all those. And I thought, great. So we start the season, and about the 8th weekend, we played Vanderbilt in Nashville. And on Friday night, 30 of the alums in Nashville wanted to have a little reception at the country club out in Hillsborough. I think it's, or Hillsdale, Hillwood, yeah. So it's a nice little country club. But we go out there. I rented a Ford Taurus and drove out there, and I'm sitting in the car in the dark listening to the Friday night Opry because I like country music. And I'm waiting all the time for the meeting to start. Well, all of a sudden, it's pitch black dark. There are 30 cars. There are going to be 30 people in the meeting. All of a sudden, I hear these sirens, and I see these red lights flashing. I think, my God, either there's a war or the President of the United States is coming, one or the other. Well, there were 3 motorcycles and 2 police cars and a limousine. Who do you think was riding in that limousine? So anyway, I thought that little speech about ego didn't last very long, did it? So once Tommy, he did a great job for us. He got people stirred up and excited and fun and a positive attitude. And then in the book, I just say, this is the only negative comment I have in this book, and I think it's generous. I said, Tommy did great for us. He just left at night without saying goodbye. That's all. And he did. That's what he did. And so when he did that, we had to find another coach. And of course, I like David Cutcliffe just so much and his family. And so I called Archie immediately and said, Archie, what do you think about us calling David? He said, I think you ought to do it. And the way that process works is you call the director of athletics at the other school and say, we would like to talk to Coach X about being a coach with us. And so we called, and they said, fine. And we met with Pete, and I met with David, and we made a deal. And David came in here in December and won an Independence Bowl while suffering from pancreatitis. And then he was great. I mean, he did great. Brought Eli here. People were upbeat. We were winning games. We were doing very clean program. He was a man of principle. And he didn't know it, but he had 5 blocked vessels. I guess they're arteries. And he just got slower and slower and slower. In the last 2 years, he didn't recruit. And we signed 12 players one year and 13 one year. Eli graduated. And all of a sudden, we were back down at the bottom of the Southeastern Conference. So Pete says to David, I'm just telling you the red-eyed truth about what happened. He says to David, after the season's over, told him 6 weeks before the season, would you please bring me a plan for what you intend to do about this downward trend we're in? And I don't know what David said, but we met that morning after the loss to Mississippi State, and David had no plan. And he just didn't have a plan, and he wouldn't talk about it. I think he was, I mean, I've had heart trouble. I just think he was sick. I don't think he's getting enough oxygen. And so then he said, well, let me go out here. He went out and brought in a yellow pad that didn't have anything written on it. And that was his plan. He didn't have anything on it. He said, I'm going to work harder. And Pete said, well, no, that's not what I asked you to do. And so I saw where that was going, and I very courageously said, why don't I just leave this to the two of you to work this out? And I got out of there, and David resigned, and he was paid, and he was angry, and a lot of people were angry and mad at Pete and that sort of thing. We had very few SEC quality players. So why do you hire Ed Ogeron, right? I mean, he from South Louisiana, he was tough.
He's undefeated now at Southern Cal.
I know, and he's going. I'm hoping he goes 8-0. I just loved him. I mean, I loved him. He was funny and he was tough, and he used all that bad language that people talked about, and I thought, my Lord, that is not new to football. I mean, if you think that's new, you don't know anything about football. Military and athletics have a lot of vulgarity just built into them. I actually put in the book a scene that occurred when I was playing here where we had a player hit in the face, and he was lying on the ground, and every time his heart would beat, blood would shoot up like this out of his helmet and back into his helmet. And one of our coaches walked over to him and flipped him on his side, and this is crude. I'm just going to tell you this is crude, but I'm going to tell you now. He says, get up, man. He said, my hemorrhoids bleed more than that every morning. This kid is bleeding to death. And so anyway, cursing did not start with Ed Ogeron. I want y'all to know that. But he had trouble being a head coach, but he could recruit. He has 13 players in the National Football League right now. And after we lost the state, that third year he was here, and we only won 3 games, And we called the meeting. There's always the meeting, you know. And he comes in the meeting. He says, "Guys, I understand." He says, "Y'all were great. I thank you for the opportunity. I hope you build a great program at Ole Miss. My family and I love being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Shook hands and left. I mean, he was as nice as he could be. And so it was at the next event. You asked me to do this, right?
I did.
Okay. So the next event is we get this call from Frank Broyles, Pete does, who's the AD, athletics director at Arkansas. He said, "Houston Nutt is getting ready to quit at Arkansas." And well, Houston has had this great record at Arkansas, mostly. He's had a few bad years, been to 2 championship games in SEC. We haven't been yet, by the way. Anyway, so I think that God has intervened, and he's sending us an experienced coach who has won. And so in about that long, I get a call from the president, John White. He says, you need to hire him. He's just a great person, great coach, works like a Trojan, da-da-da-da-da. So we did, and we thought we had football solved. Because for you all who don't like football so much, here's the deal about football. It is so visible, it is so emotional, and it builds community, and people are really invested in it emotionally and sometimes financially. And we can talk about the relationship between winning and private donors, but if you're going to play football, you need to be successful and competitive, and it needs to be exciting. And so here comes Houston Nutt, who we think can do all the things that we want him to do. And he's a clean-cut guy, got a great little family, beautiful wife. He's nice, does not use profanity, does not use alcohol. I mean, he is like the role model. And the first 2 years, we go to the Cotton Bowl. We win 2 Cotton Bowls. We're 9-2,
9-4, yeah.
something like that. And everybody's just elated. The only thing is, Houston's not recruiting, and nobody knows that. And so the 3rd year, we win 3 games, I think. The 4th year, we win 3 games, and we don't even show up against Mississippi State, which is very bad to not show up. And so he was asked to leave. And he was paid, and he was gone. And then Chancellor Jones, very wisely, asked Archie Manning and Mike Glenn from FedEx, both knowledgeable about sports and both real interested in Ole Miss, to help find a coach and a director of athletics. And they did, and they found 2 what appear to be wonderful people who have created a new, it's almost like this is a beginning. It's like we've started over. And last year was exciting, and people felt good about it. And being on television has something to do with enrollment. There are people who come to school here because they have seen an Ole Miss team or performing group on television, and they see the quality, and they see the way the students look, and they come to school here, and that helps our enrollment. And so that's the story on those 4 coaches. Yeah. But nobody ever wanted to have nobody wanted to be more successful in athletics more than I did. Maybe as much, but not more, because I knew the benefits, not only to the school, but to the players. Because team members become closer than family members. Team members spend all of their time together. There's no doubt that Warner Alford, with whom I roomed 4 years, and Charlie Flowers and Jake Gibbs and Bobby Franklin, those people, Marvin Terrell, I can go on and on and on, know more about me than my brother does. There's no doubt about it. And I know more about them. You just get that close because you live and die together.
Okay, we were up and down with football, but we really went this way in 14 years that you were here.
We did, yeah.
I can think of any number of things that happened. Is there any one accomplishment of which you're most proud here?
Yeah, there is. And by the way, I'm scared to death of the word pride. I'm a Methodist, and somewhere I remember somebody saying that the Bible says pride goes before destruction and the haughty spirit goes before the fall. So I don't know if I'm proud or not, but I sure feel good about it. Okay?
All right, well, feel good about it.
I feel good about it. This started with me when I was a kid, and we were in Moss Point, and we were on the lower side of the median income group. My dad was a coach and worked at a plant and worked at a bank, and I don't know what today, he would probably made an equivalent of today's salary of $12,500 a year. So he was making like $2,500 or something. And we had 6 of us, and my mother was a magician in the kitchen, and she could make food out of air, I think, like this, and out comes something good. But anyway, I just became aware early on of Mississippi being viewed as a poor state, and that we were not well educated, and that we began to get reported as being the most illiterate and the most obese and the most single mothers. And I mean, the list just went on, negative, and it just burned me up because I knew so many great Mississippi people. And so all of my life, I've been real sensitive about us being perceived as a great state and this being perceived as a great university. And so the first question asked me when I interviewed for the chancellor's job was, what is your vision for the university? Now, I want you all just to pause a second, move over here and think about this. Now, I'm from Moss Point, and I made a D- complimentary in chemistry, and I'm being asked my vision for this 150-year-old university, okay? So I needed big-time help from above, and it came. And what I said to Nan Baker, the chair of the board, I said, to be perceived as one of America's great public universities. That was my answer, and I have no idea where that came from, because I don't think I'd ever written it down. And I didn't expect that question, but I gave it, and it kind of caught on. And although I was teased about it, laughed at, the cynic said, you idiot, what do you mean great university? What is a great university? Well, I had a good answer. I said Michigan for openers. Texas, pretty good. North Carolina, pretty good. Virginia, they're pretty good. Georgia, they're pretty good. Let's be like them. Why do we have to be last? Let's not be last. Let's reject mediocrity. And so then the team came into play. And we got this group of people together who wanted to do the same things that I wanted to do. And we had a retreat. And you'll see in this book a list of 21 what we call key strategies. And they were all aimed at strengthening the substance of the university, but at the same time changing the reputation of the school. But to answer your question, what I feel best about is that Ole Miss people feel better about Ole Miss and about themselves than they did when we started.
And along the way, you had a wrestling match over symbols.
We did. And I'll be glad. It's never fun to talk about that, but I'll certainly be glad to talk about it. But I really want to underscore this self-perception business. And some of that I learned from Coach Vaught, and some of it just from watching other people operate. If you think you're going to lose, count it. Put it in the L. Put it in the loss column. You really will lose, whether it's a game or an election or trying to be the outstanding professor or whatever you're doing. You've got to believe that you can get it done. And we believed it. Our team believed it. And we put it down on paper, 21 of them, everyone quantifiable, measurable, objectively measurable. And some of them seemed, I was told by one of the members of the team, there were 23 or 4 of us who went on a retreat, and this one kept coming back and say, they all say you crazy as hell. We can't do that. I said, I am crazy. I know I'm crazy. I'm crazy about this because I know we can do this if we'll just do it. And of course, a lot of things started happening. The economy became real strong in 1995. Lots of our graduates became very successful. We had strong leadership in Congress. We had mature graduates. It had become part of our culture, American culture, for the private sector to provide money to public universities, which was a brand new idea. When Gerald Turner came here in 1984, he spent his first 2 years, because Don Frugier and I did it with him, going around trying to make our alumni understand it was okay to give money to academic programs, not just to athletics. And we worked hard on that. And once it got started, we just kept working on it. So anyway, I would say, I've talked too long again, but the answer is, I really believe Ole Miss people feel better about Ole Miss now than they did before 1995. I had a letter today from a lady in Byram. She was a student here in 1981, and she just had two children. She has two children in school now, and she said, I just wish I could help my children understand the difference in that university today as opposed to 1981. And that may be as heartwarming a letter as I've ever received. And I wrote her back and thanked her, because I do get a pretty good bit of mail. Some of it's nice and some of it's not so nice, but I thought it was wonderful that she felt that way. And she's down there in Byram and feeling good about her university. So anyway, I think that's my answer. Now, we could go around the campus and talk about facilities, and we're in one that I would say is a great improvement. The chapel's a great improvement. The library addition is, the law school is, the Insight Park Research Center is. I mean, there's a long list of improvements.
When we were both undergraduates here at the segregated school, how much did you work at to see that we put all that behind us?
I would say that a good part of every day was spent on I'm gonna call it the race issue, just simple term, simpler, complicated subject, simpler term. But every day we thought about ways to present the university in a more positive light and in a more contemporary light. We were being viewed as a 1962 institution. And if you went online and put Ole Miss in, what you saw was the James Meredith riot. If when you leave here tonight, you take 2 minutes and go to Google and Google Kent State, you will see a 1970 group of National Guard people shooting at students. I mean, those kinds of images are hard to get rid of. And so we spent a lot of time and money and energy trying to bring people to the campus, people who had audiences or had a forum or had a TV show. The chancellor gets to select the commencement speaker. And so I love English teachers, but I didn't invite any English. I invited Bob Schieffer, and I invited Judy Woodruff and David Halberstam. I tried to get Donna Shalala. I tried to get people here who could tell the world what was going on at Ole Miss. And the team bought into that. Everybody supported it. And then, of course, the icing on the cake was a presidential debate, which was in 2008. And there's so many things about that that are remarkable. One is that we were able to attract it. Number two, that we could pay for it. It cost $5 million, and it has to be paid for with private money. And you more or less turn your campus over to the commission on presidential debates when you have it. So you do all this chaining, and you have redundant electric supply systems and so forth. And Andy Mullins was the chairman of that committee, and he was given authority and recognition for doing a great job, and we produced a wonderful presidential debate. And just ironically, the first African-American candidate for president on the stage at Ole Miss. And that was not lost on anybody. But what really happened is we had between 2,500 and 3,000 journalists from all over the world here. Every network, every television network, virtually every cable. Television was nonstop from 5 in the morning until late at night. Classes, the faculty put together 16 classes on the presidential debate and had wonderful success with those classes. The people, all these well-known television characters who we watch, and just wandering around the campus and seeing students and just seeing what a normal environment this was. And it wasn't anything like what they'd seen on television. And they fell in love with the place. And they were able to have lunch at, what's the name of that place, Andy? The vegetables. Ajax. I mean, if you feed somebody lunch at Ajax, they think this is really a special place. But anyway, we had a week with the national and international press, and they got a really good look at us. And so help me, the way we were described in articles in national newspapers changed. And it didn't start out as a negative Ole Miss, where they had the riot in 1962 and racist state and da-da-da-da-da. It wasn't that way anymore. It became much more neutral. Occasionally we'd read something, and of course the way the team and I dealt with that was we said, look, what happened, happened. We don't deny it. It was not good. It was bad, but it's over. That happened. Now the remnants of it are not over, and we work on that every day that we get up every day. And so we made some progress, and people always say, well, yeah, but there's still a lot more to be done. Well, there is. But the minute God decided to put Adam and Eve on this earth, there was always going to be a lot more to be done, because people do have a way of creating situations that have to be dealt with, be made better. Here I go, I'm rambling, I'm sorry.
It's okay, we got a few minutes. Does anybody have a question from the audience? Right
Yes, ma'am.
here.
My name is Caitlin Gordon, and I'm a student here. I'm studying public policy. And you talked a lot about perception and how the university is perceived, and how you did a lot, you and your team did a lot to work to change that. And I think that we have made a lot of improvements. But I want you to talk a little bit more about not just changing perception, but actually changing reality.
Yeah.
And changing culture. Because it's one thing to change the way that people look at the university.
That's right.
But it's another thing to actually make that true.
That's such a wonderfully perceptive comment and slash.
Did everybody hear the question? Okay, good.
Changing perception is one thing, but changing substance is something else, right? And so what we really tried to do was strengthen every academic program, strengthen physical facilities, extracurricular opportunities for students, things that you all take for granted now didn't exist 10 years ago. I mean, the Honors College was something that, well, let me give you, I'll try to do this real fast, okay? We wanted to have a chapter of Phi Beta Kappa, because we wanted our students to be members. And we had tried 3 times during my career at Ole Miss, and had failed 3 times. So one of the first things I did was go to Washington and ask Doug Ford at the Phi Beta Kappa office, executive director, what do we need to do? First thing he said was, I'm stunned Ole Miss doesn't have a chapter. It's a great old university. I said, right, that's why I'm here, you know. And so he says you got to do 5 things. You have to increase your library holdings. We're at 800,000 or something, and we got to be over 1 million. You've got to raise the faculty salaries for the faculty in liberal arts. That's going to take a bunch of money, because like $2 million was a 1% raise, and it's hard to get a bunch of $2 million packages together. Okay, third, you have to have a marquee academic program that attracts the very best students from across the nation. Fourth, you got to get that football team off of probation. And you're not going to get a Phi Beta Kappa chapter if you're on probation, because that suggests that you're not playing by the rules. And then fifth, and this is really where, I mean, a lot more people know about this than anything else probably. They say you got to get rid of that Confederate flag. I thought, thank you so much, because I know how easy that's getting ready to be, you know. God almighty. We tried it 3 times before, and every time it failed. But it was so clear that it was divisive and it was damaging that it was easy for our team to agree that we were going to get rid of that Confederate flag. Tommy Tuberville, I'll go over there one Sunday morning after they'd lost to Mississippi State in 1997. And they all sitting, the coaches all sitting there like they each had a whipping or something, because they'd had one the day before. And I said, what is the matter with y'all? And they said, we can't recruit against the flag. I said, well, we're getting ready to take that flag on. Little did I know. I mean, Mr. Naive here. I thought everybody felt like I did. That if it'll help Ole Miss, let's do it. You know, even if I have to give it something personal that I love. Well, that is not how people feel about symbols. Symbols, I even tried to write a rational article for the student newspaper entitled Substance Over Symbols. It was laughed off of the campus. I mean, hooted by the students. And now that I've reread it, I see why they did. But it didn't resonate, I can just tell you that. And people were so emotional about it. And it's so complicated. But it wasn't any doubt that that Confederate flag had been appropriated by the Ku Klux Klan, by the neo-Nazis, by the skinheads, and by other hate groups. And as long as it was associated with Ole Miss, it was going to be damaging to Ole Miss. And we'd lost 1,000 students between 1990 and 1995. State funding had been consistently going down, and if enrollment goes down and state funding goes down, your revenue goes down, so the number of teachers, the number of scholarships, the quality of the programs, scientific equipment, everything else is diminished as well. And so we took it on, and we hired the best advertising agency in probably in the world, Burson Marsteller, out of New York. And Mr. Burson is a graduate of Ole Miss, and now about 90 years old, but he jumped all over it and sent 3 of his best people down here. And he said, Bobby, you're a former football player, you're the only person who can do this. Well, there were a lot of times during that 9 months where I was sure that I was the right person to do it. And matter of fact, I write about it in the book. I think the best thing I wrote in this book, if I were going to grade it, has to do with how I felt after I'd been beaten on, and others, Andy and other people had been beaten on as well, for having done that, because a significant portion of our population had very emotional feelings about the flag. And it didn't mean race to them. It didn't mean segregation. It was like part of our past, and we were, quote, changing the past. Do we have time for me to read that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I actually opened this book with a letter. We received several thousand letters. Some groups sent duplicates. The Sons of the Confederacy sent postcards, for example, and there were like 3,000 of them. But this happened soon after the news broke that we were reviewing the symbols. The police chief showed up at my office, and he says, Chancellor, we need to talk. And I stood up and took off my glasses, and I said, come in, let's sit down. And so I talk a little bit about the campus having been in furor and everybody upset, and the Mississippian writing one way one day and another way the next day. And then he says all kinds of things, accused me of cultural imperialism and ethnic cleansing. The words like revile, nauseate, and disgust to describe his feelings about me. He encouraged me to resign and go someplace where I'd be appreciated, like hell, for example. Stop the lynching of Ole Miss, stop Robert Khayat from destroying the university. So the police officer and I sat down, and he said, you really need to see this. He hands me a fax, and here's what it said. Dear traitor, it is clear from your last name that you were not born in the United States of America. My daddy's family was Lebanese. I was born in Moss Point, in the Jackson County Hospital. Okay, so anyway, try as you may to vilify our heritage and spit on the graves of our ancestors, I can promise you, you will never live to see that day. You may think you're safe, but you will never see us coming. Your family will never see us coming. Now we had about, I think there were 13 or 14 overt death threats. One of the curious things about this is that these letters came from Missoula, Montana, and Oklahoma City, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Columbia, South Carolina, and somewhere in Georgia, and I don't remember where, but anyhow, there were about 14. And the women in our office who had the responsibility of opening the mail wore rubber gloves, and they wore masks. And the police officers opened all the boxes, and that went over 7 months. Now, about that flag, there was, in addition to this group of people who felt it was something that was part of who they were, a lot of people, black primarily, but a lot of white people felt like the flag was an absolute insult. It was damaging. It made them sad. It was derogatory, and they didn't want anything to do with it. And they didn't want to be associated with a university that held it up as some sort of valued symbol. And so we had to go through that. It lasted for 7 months. Our very bright team came up with the idea of banning sticks, because sticks are not safe. You can touch somebody in the eye with a stick. Umbrella, no umbrella. No hot dog on a stick, no flag on a stick. No big flag, no big sign, because you buy a ticket, you have a right to see the game. So we were able to comply with the First Amendment of free speech and still ban the sticks. And without a stick, a flag is not much of a flag. And so they disappeared. Between 97 and 98, the flags went away. And the discussion mostly went away. We still get, I don't know what happens now in the chancellor's office, but I occasionally get a call or an email calling me some kind of scoundrel. But the good that move did for this university so far outweighs any personal loss of affection that I just know that it was the right thing to do. I know that we wouldn't have gotten to Chapter Phi Beta Kappa had we not done it. We now have nearly 1,000 students who hold that valuable key. And for me, and I've said this over and over and over in arguments or discussions about this, I would rather see one student get one Phi Beta Kappa key than 37,000 people waving Confederate flags 7 Saturdays a year. I mean, I used to have a friend who said, that doesn't rhyme. That didn't rhyme to me because Phi Beta Kappa is the most prestigious academic organization in the world and the oldest. And we needed to be part of that circle, 260 schools out of 3,000, and we couldn't get in. So anyway, that's kind of the story on the flag.
Caitlin, that was a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, that
Got
really
time
was.
for one more question. Back in the back.
Oh, well, let me finish Caitlin's question.
Right.
One other thing. Here I'm gonna give you just an example of substance, okay? And this comes as a surprise to everybody, but Ole Miss is the flagship university in America for Chinese education. And that's pretty substantive, you know? I don't even know if we taught Chinese before the Croft Institute and the Honors College and so forth. So the substance effort was underway, and Dr. Carolyn Staten and Morris Stocks, who's provost now, and John Winkle, who just retired, and a number of other great faculty people worked hard to keep lifting. But it became, there's a lot of peer pressure among the faculty to have wonderful classes, challenge their students, excite their students. And so I think that, I don't know, I can't say that the substance is here and symbols are here, but they're both on them. We made progress. Excuse me.
In the back. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ryan Upshaw from Moss Point, and I wondered.
You from Moss Point?
Yeah.
You going straight to heaven, man, you know?
And I wondered, you accomplished so many different things during your time as leader of the university. Was there anything that you wanted to accomplish that you weren't able to?
There is, and my wife just died laughing when I said it, because she's very familiar with my chemistry story. But what we really need on this campus is a great big fine science building, and it would be $100 million. Now, a lot of people think we really need a Coliseum, and I'm sure we do. But if I had a choice of a great science building, modern science building, or anything else, that's probably what I would want to do. I wish we could have done something about that. I wish our team would have done a better job of telling the story of Ole Miss that was evolving every day. One of our problems was we were all up to here working as hard as we could work to get students and to encourage faculty and attract revenue and be more efficient in the way we operated and present a beautiful campus so that when people came here, they were impressed. They knew they were in a different environment. I've always, even when I was a kid, I thought, when you walk on a university campus, you ought to feel it. You ought to know that something's going on here that doesn't go on Main Street. They're different missions. And so we worked hard on trying to create that atmosphere. Dr. Norton, sitting back there behind you, he could give you a quick story about journalism, Caitlin, that you might be interested in, about what's happened to journalism since it became the Meek School and he came here as dean. He won't do it because he's too humble and modest, but I will do it. We went from almost a nothing population school to 300 students to we're bumping up against 1,000 now. And it's highly respected. The accountancy school was chosen 4th in the nation just recently. Pharmacy's in the top 10 every year. We have some wonderful academic programs here. Now you have a choice. You can go down to the library downtown and watch TV and drink beer, or you can go to the library on the campus and get in the books or in a computer or something. I had a letter from a man in Dallas fussing about our library late charges His daughter had charged $180-something for a Visa card for library charges. He said, you know, when I was in school, it was a quarter if you were late. I said, well, this is a different library. You better ask that kid which library she's talking about.
Robert, thank you very much.
Thank
We're
you.
out of time. You've been a wonderful leader. You're a wonderful
thank you.
guest.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
You're
buddy.
a great host.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you.